Hi guys, so what I wanted to do today was just take you through how to rearrange a formula, formulae being plural, because there are two ways of doing this. Let's look at the gravitational potential energy formula that we looked at last lesson. So you've got gravitational potential energy equals mass times gravitational field strength times height. Now, if you remember, energy is always measured in joules, mass is measured in kilograms. So, for example, if you got given grams in a question, you'd have to turn it into kilograms first of all. Gravitational field strength is measured in newtons per kilogram, and your height is measured in meters. So let's say we got a question like Katie, who's got a mass of 55 kilograms. She wanted to climb her ladder, which had a height of, I don't know, let's say 3 meters, really tall ladder, because she wants to clean her gutters out. Okay, and for this question, we're going to take gravitational field strength to equal 10 newtons per kilogram. You'll always be given that value in the question. So if it was a nice straightforward question like that, all we do now is something called substitution. So we substitute the numbers we know into the equation we've got. So we would say, for example, that the gravitational potential energy is 55, because that's the mass. Our G, gravitational field strength, is 10 newtons per kilogram, so we substitute that number in. And the height is 3 meters, so we substitute that in. Pop all three numbers into the calculator, and we get 1,650 joules. Now, every time you come to a calculation, that's what I would like you to do. Write it out in those steps. So the first step is to substitute. So this is called substitution. Substitute in the numbers you know. Okay. Do the calculation, but write the workings out down. In case you make a mistake here, then you can score the mark for that. Put the answer and remember the units as well. So that's answer and units. And this is a fairly simple example. Okay? All right then. Now, what would you do if you needed to calculate the height? Maybe you didn't know what the height was. Okay? So you have to do a little bit of rearranging. Now, the Mathy way that you would do this, let's start again with our equation. EP equals M times G times H. Remember, this is a recall equation, so you have to learn this one. That's mugaha. Okay? And let's say, well, we'll use this question, okay, already. So we know our EP is 1,650 joules. Okay? Let's say we know our mass, which we did because it was 55. Gravitational field strength is 10. But let's pretend we didn't know what the height was. So how would we work that out? Can you see what I've done? I've substituted the numbers into the equation and just left our unknown. So we're still going back to meet that original substitution. Okay? Now we do the calculation. So how do we get H on its own? To get H on its own over here, you've got to divide this side by your 55 times H. And if you see then, these are going to cancel out, because that 55 divided by 55, there, 10 divided by 10, we're left with H on its own. Okay? So we have to we'll leave H on its own there, and we have to do the same to the other side that we did to this side. So we've got to divide this side by our 55 times 10. We'll pop that in brackets there. Okay, and that will tell us how H. Now, if you put those numbers into your calculator, 1650 divided by brackets, 55 times 10, close brackets, the answer is 3. 3 equals H. 3 meters, which is what we had up here. Okay? So that's the Mathy way of doing it. However, I'm just going to show you a little trick with a formula triangle. Now, I mentioned this in the last video, but I felt like I skipped over it, which is why I'm going to give you a bit more detail here. Okay? So, in the triangle, that line across the middle means divided by. Okay? Back to what our equation is. I'm always a big fan of writing the equation down. The more times you write it, the more times you're likely to remember it. EP equals mugaha. And this is really simple, okay? If you have an equation like this, then there's no dividing line in this equation here at the moment, okay? So what we do is we take the biggest part of the equation, which is these three things multiplied by each other, and we put that in the biggest part of the triangle, which means that the other thing has to go up the top here, okay? That's how we do it. And if we wanted to calculate h now, all we do is we cover up the h with our finger, and we're left with the equation, which is now h equals EP divided by, that's the divided by, m times g. So we'd write it out. H equals EP divided by m times g. Okay? Pop those in brackets, because if you're going to do it all on the calculator all in one go, you would need those brackets there. Okay? Alright, something slightly different if you have an equation that has a dividing line in it already, so I'll just explain that. So for this one, let's look at the power equation. So power equals energy divided by time. Now, you haven't met this one yet, but power is measured in something called watts, and energy is measured in joules, time is measured in seconds. A watt is a joule per second, so that's where we get that from. Okay, now we've got a dividing line in this already, so you can go through and do the equation in the same way as we did before with the other one, so we can just substitute the numbers in, and then treat the two sides of the equation the same way to get something on its own. But if we pop this into a formula triangle, we've already got something divided by something else. So it's really simple. We draw in our dividing line, and we pop the energy here up on the top because it's already above the dividing line in our equation. Okay, and then this time the other two things go into the bottom, and they have to be multiplied by each other on the bottom. Okay, because that's the rule. So our power times our time. Okay, now if I wanted to find out what power was, I cover up the power with my finger, and I'm left with energy divided by time. Power equals energy divided by time. If I wanted to know energy, I'd cover up the energy, and I'm left with power times time. So that one would be energy equals power times time. Okay, so that's an introduction to rearranging formulae. Okay, off to you to practice.